Thank you, Robbie. Thank you, everyone, for joining us, and thank you to everyone who made this happen so quickly. I know it was no small task, and I really appreciate it. As Robbie said, he's going to be watching the chat boxes and getting the questions to me. Please feel free to take notes. If there's a topic or something you want to know more about as we go on, please jot it down and send it to me, because as Robbie mentioned, we're going to be doing a parts 2 and 3, and I'm really open. I want to make this tailored to what you as providers need to learn more about. I have been doing telemental health since 2005. Back then it was the distance counseling credential, and it was before smartphones. I was doing it on a flip phone because I used to work for an online charter school. So it was pretty new then. So I'm kind of excited that the interest has been growing, and even more excited that the technology is growing along with it, because doing it on a flip phone was not that easy. Now, if you see my letters, now you see BCTMH. That means Board Certified Telemental Health. I'll get into that a little bit more later. That credential has been grandfathered from DCC to BCTMH. I've stayed with it because this is a topic I'm very passionate about. It really helps us meet people where they are. And if any of you attended the national conference in Denver last summer, this presentation is based from that, but a little more focused and a bit briefer. So real quickly, we're hearing a lot of the impact of COVID-19. This is a global crisis, but it is not affecting everybody in the same way. So we don't want to assume that it's making everything worse for everybody necessarily, or that everyone enjoys not having a schedule. So we need to be careful in our assumptions on how it's affecting people. For some, it could be relieving stress. It could be eliminating some triggers for gambling or other addictive related disorders. But then it could be adding boredom. So we could have gamblers that are now seeking excitement and trying to be in action more to escape or to cope with boredom. The increased stress that we're facing, financial stress, safety concerns. As Robbie mentioned, we're being told that this is going to be kind of a really crucial week for our country, and just hearing those messages could make people feel concerned for their own safety. Family stress. I know in my private practice, I'm seeing a huge spike in referrals for couples counseling, for example, because all of a sudden everyone is kind of locked at home, or they could be separated from family that they typically support. So some significant stress there. And just the stress that comes with the change of routine. The social isolation piece is a big one. Gamblers could be facing less social accountability and less social support. So on one hand, they don't have anyone, typically if they wouldn't gamble at work, for example, because people are around them, now they're at home, they may have less of that accountability. Or they could be using gaming, gambling as a way to connect with others, and this could be justifying their gambling online. And then, the issue with reduced access to healthcare, treatment, meeting schedules interrupted. Some communities have been able to take the 12-step meetings online. Some have not. Some aren't comfortable doing that online. They have concerns that it kind of negates the anonymity if you are logging into something or using your phone. So that world has been interrupted as well, which of course is why we're here today, to talk about how we can increase that access. So with the impact of COVID-19, we also have to look at access to technology. A gambler may have increased access, again, uninterrupted access. They may not have the restrictions on their internet. Maybe they had if they worked in an office setting. Now they're in their home network all day. So that's going to kind of open the gates for that. Lotteries have been deemed essential in many communities. I have not yet come across a state that has taken their lottery system down. They have been deemed essential, so they are continuing to function. Many places have, scratch-off machines in grocery stores and gas stations anyway. So the access in terms of lotteries, I've not seen any interruption to that. Some casinos and other face-to-face gaming sites have been closed down, but not all. There was some debate in the state of Florida over the last couple weeks about leaving casinos open, or casinos just refusing to close. trying to use loopholes, like the fact that they have restaurants, for example, as a reason to keep them open. So Florida's kind of been a hot spot for the social debate about face-to-face casinos. Some of them are saying, well, we provide needed services. Those that have a lot of elderly clientele say, well, we provide medical supplies. So kind of keep an eye on that in your own communities. That now that those face-to-face sites are closing, that more gamblers may be going to online gambling. Sports betting obviously has taken a huge hit. We know this in North Carolina, right? We're missing our March Madness. So betting has, some of the sports betting sites are looking at betting on other things like the weather, some European sports, and even pandemic stats. You can bet. There was one sports betting site that had a whole page dedicated to betting on what they called the Trumpisms of the day's briefing. So you could actually bet on what the president or other high-level government personnel were going to say during the briefings. So we're finding lots of other things to bet on, even in lieu of sports. Seeing a lot of predatory marketing. So ads that say, oh, are you stressed out? Are you trapped at home? Come to this site. So we're seeing the gambling sites and the online gaming kind of engage in some borderline predatory marketing strategies or waiving fees to get you to start playing. And in terms of online gambling, gamblers may resort to offshore or illegal sites because their access points are being closed off in other places. So if you have someone that is in action, maybe they prefer the casinos. Casinos are no longer an option. They might start trying different things. So where does telemental health fit in? It's really likely that your clients have already used technology to access care at some point, even before the pandemic. They're probably, used to seeing ads for hotlines, right? We have the gambling, the phone number they can call in. It's likely that if you're in the network, this is how they found you to begin with. So this is not as much of a foreign concept to them. It really has the potential to change the relationship with the device. So if you have a gambler who is using that laptop or that smartphone or that tablet to stay in action, it can really be an interesting transition. I have a client that I was working with on a video-based session because she told me flat out, if we did phone sessions, she was going to be distracted and she would be playing while we were talking. So she was kind of forcing herself to have video-based. And on top of that, she was intentionally using her phone instead of her large laptop because she plays on her phone. And she said she wanted to change the association that when she picks up her phone, she thought of seeing my face instead of her game, which, could be scary, but okay. And that really worked for her. Every session was on her phone. And yes, there were some challenges with that, getting it kind of in the right lighting, at the right angles. She didn't have to hold it, getting comfortable. But for her, that was really important for her that she used her phone because it helped her kind of reassociate the phone to treatment instead of just gaming. And then, a quick plug, if you have not already heard of Gamban, one question that I often get is, well, what's the point if I can just sit here and play while I'm talking to you? Well, we can use Gamban and they will, shut down access to gambling on multiple devices. And from my experience too, just working with them, if someone tells them, hey, I'm in treatment for this, they have been a little more lenient on the licenses, the number of devices that they're closing down. And I had one client actually accidentally find a back door, and then their tech support actually worked with her to close that gap. So they have been fantastic to work with. So if you have clients who are concerned about which device to use, they have multiple devices, they can explore using Gamban to shut it down on their devices, and it might help the use of telehealth on that device. So we know a lot of information is coming out very quickly from federal, state sources, as well as professional organizations, maybe even your employers, your agencies, your hospital systems, we're getting a lot of information very quickly. Telehealth in many places has been flat out mandated in order to provide that continuity of care and emergency services during the quarantine period. So a lot of places are saying, okay, we are not doing any face-to-face. You have to switch to telehealth. Many services were moved online with very short notice. I know a big exception to this has been addiction services because of the medical component. A couple of my clients that we were seeing for both maybe alcohol and gambling were kind of in this catch-22. So, we know it's been quick. We know there's a lot of information coming down. Just as any other crisis situation, information is going to be changing quickly, and there's going to be a lot of it coming at you. So I hope to help you figure out how to sort all this out in a way that works for you and your clients. One of the biggest changes is the emergency provisions for Medicaid and Medicare clients. So including counselors, this is something we have been fighting for, to have counselors included. Now they've made emergency provisions to allow us, and relaxation of HIPAA rules. And I'll talk more on this in just a moment. So just be aware that because of the pandemic, there's a lot of information coming from multiple levels. I always recommend checking with your immediate jurisdiction and then moving out into larger and larger circles. So if you work for an agency or a hospital system, check with them first. Then what's in your immediate jurisdiction? What's on your town level, your county level, then the state level, because that's going to affect you the most. And then checking in with your national organizations. And I'll talk a little bit more on that later, how FDA has deadlines, and that information was probably released earlier in our pandemic when we weren't sure how long things were going to last. So just be aware of those dates and deadlines. So short term, it allows us to continue treating and supporting your clients, even if it's not the ideal situation. I recognize that many of you out there did not choose this, would not have ever considered telehealth. That's okay. For some of you, this may be something you've been considering or trying out already. So in the short term, it does allow us to provide that continuity of care, even if it's not our first choice. And just as we plan to move into telehealth, as we go through this, also keep in mind we have to plan for that transition back to the office and processing the experience, not only for us as providers, but helping our clients kind of process this experience as we go. That will help you transition back to a face-to-face environment. So we don't want to overlook that if this really is kind of a short-term thing for you, be keeping tabs on how you and your clients both are experiencing this to kind of help move back into the office. Long-term, accessing treatment online or over the phone can really help with things such as the stigma of coming into an office, anxiety, pride. We know with gamblers, pride can be a big factor. We know they tend to come into treatment much later. This can help kind of bring them in sooner. Helps with costs, things like transportation, scheduling concerns. The research on women who gamble show that a significant barrier, for example, is childcare. So I have had sessions with women where they're still home with their kids, the kids are in another room, and it's okay if we have to pause so she can stick her head in to check on the kids and come back. So it allows a lot more flexibility. So if you're thinking of considering this long term, there really are a lot of benefits. It really helps us meet clients where they are. You might find during this process that your clients could develop a strong preference for either face-to-face or telemental health. So they might realize, you know what, this online thing is not for me. I'm struggling with it. I don't like it. Kind of emphasize, okay, it's just for now. A lot of things are changing. This is just one more thing that's a temporary thing. Or they might say, you know what, I really like doing therapy in my yoga pants and t-shirt with the messy bun. I don't have to get myself put together. This is kind of cool. Or I don't have to drive. I don't have to worry about leaving work and coming back. So you may consider, as you move forward, being open to a hybrid approach, which can really reduce cancellation. So if you're sitting in your office, your 2 o'clock, lets you know, hey, I'm in traffic, I'm not going to make it. Hey, turn around, give me a call. instead of canceling the appointment, maybe we can switch to phone for today or switch to the online platform for today. So it can help you kind of reduce the cancellation burden. So when we look at telemental health, we are really looking at two categories, very broadly speaking. Synchronous communication is in real time. So obviously the ideal kind of the model of this is face-to-face. So, we're in the room with the person, everything we're saying and doing is happening in real time. The two things that can, get closest to that, video chat, where you can still see the person and hear them live, and a phone call where you're not seeing them, but you have that live communication where you expect immediate response. Asynchronous communication, email, text chatting, message boards, mail, and fax. These are forms of communications where we cannot expect an immediate response. Now, we all know that person that every time we email or text, we know they're going to answer right away, or they're going to expect that answer right away. But if you do use those methods of communication with your clients, communicating to them that, these are asynchronous. If you send me an email, here's the expected turnaround time, but you don't want to set it up that it's going to be instant. Usually 24, 48 hours is a good window to get asynchronous communication back. The exception is if you do set up a live chat where the expectation is you are chatting back and forth for a specific period of time. This presentation is going to focus on the synchronous communication because that is what has been approved kind of in an emergency setting, because there are other skills involved in using asynchronous. So we're going to focus on the synchronous communication. So this should look familiar, right? The NCPG's, awesome graphic on how to get gambling help. Look at what we're already using, specifically in the gambling field. Calling, texting, and chatting. It goes to the network, through call centers, and comes to us. So it's very likely, we can assume that gamblers have already used these methods to reach us. So they're already doing the synchronous or asynchronous communication before they get to the face-to-face. So look at what we're already using. We've already had multiple pathways. So you might already be doing this, not just through NCPG, but through your agency. So phone calls. We're going to get more into specific, like how to help you plan, make your plan for this a bit later, but just some things to consider. With phone, landlines are more secure than cell phones, but I know most people don't have landlines anymore. But if that is an option and you have a client that's worried about security, landlines are our most secure form of phone calls. Now looking at cell phone security, with smartphones, this makes it a little more challenging. Do you have a dedicated phone or is it shared? Are you using your personal phone for this? If you can avoid it, I strongly recommend it. My practice, I have two separate cell phones. I have my personal phone, and then I have my clinical phone. And that phone has no apps on it. It has my Gmail, that's it. It has nothing else on it. Every time my carrier tries to download something, I strip it off. I don't want anything reporting data, even error data. I don't want anything reporting data. I don't want anything able to record calls. I don't have an assistant. So if you have Google Assistant or Siri, you want to disable it. So my work phone is as stripped as it possibly can get. Now the battery lasts forever, big plus. It's in great condition. But that, I try to keep that as secure as possible. Even when I'm on a call on my work phone, my personal phone is turned off because I don't want my Google Assistant accidentally picking up on something I say. I did have a smoking cessation session. I thought my phone was off. It was not. And I went into my personal phone later and I opened Facebook and my smart ads all of a sudden were showing me ads for Chantix. So the phones are listening. So we want to make sure we can try to secure it as much as possible. Disabling those features. If you have to use your personal phone, go into your settings and disable data collection on anything you possibly can, because you don't want it accidentally picking up on your conversations. Your recording capabilities If you are still undergoing supervision and you have permission to record sessions, there are several secure apps that you can put on your phone to record your phone calls. So you just want to make sure your client knows which app you're using. Do you have a backup number? Technology fails. Just this morning, I had a client where for some reason we could not make each other's phones ring. I called her and went right to her voicemail. She called me and went right to my voicemail. We could not actually get our phones to pick up for some reason. So we used a backup number. And having that second phone on hand for emergencies. If you are in a situation where you have to call 911, again, this is, with gamblers, we know there's a higher rate of suicidality. If you're in a position where you need to call 911, you want to do it from a second number so you can stay on the line with your client while you are contacting 911 with the other number. And you're kind of going back and forth with 911 and keeping your client on the phone as long as you can. So having that second phone for emergencies can be very helpful. You might find that, a lot of your clients will prefer the phone because they can't be seen. The downside of that is you also can't see their environment. You can't verify where they are, if they're in a safe place. I love the web-based because I can see kind of how messy their setting is versus a week before and get an idea of where they are. Of course, now with the quarantine, I don't read as much into that. But, we're also seeing that a lot of insurance companies who may have required you to use video-based, or some require that you use video-based for at least the initial session and the intake, they're relaxing on that. So you might find that clients are preferring the phone. They won't do web-based. Again, check with the payers, check with the rules of the day. That might be okay. So you might find yourself using phone-based, more than you expected. With the web-based, there are many platforms out there. And when I started doing this exclusively in my private practice 3 years ago, there were only a handful of valid options, meaning they were HIPAA compliant, they met my needs. Now there are many, many more. And so it's something we kind of have to keep reevaluating in terms of what vendor we're using. But check the fine print. Please check the fine print. You're looking for a BAA, a business associate agreement, and you want to make sure they are HIPAA compliant. Are they encrypted? Many of them are not. Many of them treat you like a subcontractor, so you're kind of working for them and they give you your referrals, versus other platforms that allow you to customize it to your practice. So really, you have to really read between the lines on some of these vendors, and ask around, see who's using what, and have that backup plan. Again, if you're using a web-based portal, technology goes out. Make sure that you have it set up with your client. Hey, if we lose internet connection, everyone's online at once. If we use internet connection, I'm going to call you from this phone number. What's a good number to call that you're going to have available during our session? You want to have that backup in case the web-based portal fails. Because again, internet can go out. It's going up and down as everyone's using it. So you want to make sure you've got that kind of safety net. So touching on some legal and ethical areas. Again, this is just meant to kind of be this introduction, get you thinking about some things. Many of these issues are very similar to what we deal with in face-to-face settings, right? Competency and training, that's a big one. Now we have to extend it to what competency and training do we have in telehealth? Again, if you're jumping into this because of the pandemic, you may not have the opportunity to really get as much training as you would like. That's okay, as long as you stay kind of in your comfort zone and you're open with your clients as to the training that you're getting. Many agencies and many companies out there are offering free and reduced trainings on a variety of subjects right now. Including this one is free. It's amazing. And so we're going to be rolling out 2 more of these. So please be thinking of what else you want to learn to help you build that competence. But those are the typical legal and ethical areas. Technology requirements and accessibility. We're a little limited right now doing this on an emergency basis in terms of vetting our clients to make sure it's appropriate for them and that they have the access, but it's something to consider. Some platforms, you'll find work better on iPhone versus Android. We want to make sure we're choosing things that are kind of equal across the board. If your client does not have access to the internet or does not have a smartphone, many gamblers choose to go back to the older flip phones. They don't have internet at their fingertips. Being flexible and working with them over the phone instead of video. Technology failure procedures, touched on that a second ago. Emergency procedures, again, having an emergency contact, having a way to call 911 just as you would face-to-face, and that privacy and confidentiality piece. So when I work with my clients online, again, my practice is 100% online. I kind of have this memorized speech that, here's how privacy and confidentiality works. Obviously, we are still under the duty to warn rules. That does not change. But we get into privacy. It's talking to them about things like, okay, when we're having our session, I am in my home office. My door is closed. I'm in control of my environment. I know no one is going to come in or out except maybe my golden retriever. We have a service dog in our house who is trained to open doors. And I was doing a session with 2 other counselors, actually working with them on telehealth just last week. And my dog decided to open my door and bring me his tennis ball and drop it on my lap. So my privacy, it was funny. I was like, well, okay, my furry office manager decided to come in. But I'm letting them know, hey, my door is closed. No one's coming in or out. I let them know about my phone, that the phone that I'm talking to them on, it's locked down by PIN and fingerprint. There are no apps reporting data, those kinds of things. Then we have to talk to the client about their privacy. You know what? Especially if you are on the phone, I can't see you face to face. I don't know if you're in a safe, private environment. Here are some things to think about. Who else is, in the house right now? Are you, in a place where you can close the door? I've had a lot of sessions where people are in their closets. If that's where they feel safe, it's totally fine. But kind of talking them through privacy on their end and that they're responsible for that. We don't want people having sessions in their cars driving. Now, with COVID, some clients said, you know what, I'm sitting in the driveway or in my garage in my car and it's off. That's fine. That might be their only private, place they can go. But I have had sessions where the client has asked me to hang on for a second and they're ordering at McDonald's. That's not okay. That's not safe. We don't want them multitasking like that. So having that conversation with them about privacy and safety on their side of things. So common themes, among different codes of ethics. I know we probably have people from multiple licensure areas and disciplines. Here are some common themes that we have. Doing no harm, boundaries of competence, informed consent. This is going to be a big piece. If you're jumping into telehealth, you do have to modify or add an addendum to your informed consent. Multiple relationships and conflicts of interest, where this gets a little unique in telehealth, is your online, your social media presence. For example, with the online, counseling, if I have someone that has reached me through Facebook, for example, now I don't have a Facebook page for my business. I try to keep it very personal, but I had a client reach out to me word of mouth. She was friends with another former client. She happened to realize we were in the same Facebook group for our town. So I took myself out of that Facebook group because multiple relationships has been decided that can extend to social media presence as well. So we have to watch that. Confidentiality and privacy is discussed across the board, obviously, handling emergencies and legal jurisdiction. So while you want to kind of dive into your individual code of ethics for your profession, these are some of the common themes. So if we break this down a little bit, the American Psychological Association and Psychiatric Association, so the APAs, do not specifically mention technology, telemental health, or telehealth. The NASW integrates standards related to technology use throughout each section. So basically they've added it as the last bullet point of each section and sections that are relevant. So you have to comb through. The American Counseling Association actually developed a separate section in their code to specifically address the distance counseling technology and social media. So if you go to counseling.org, you can look it up. It's public access. Section H is their distance counseling section. And what I love about what ACA has done is they have pretty much spelled it out. It is very detailed. So even if you're not a counselor and that's not your area, take a look at how they've outlined Section H. It's almost like a manual. I love it. And you understand that all codes of ethics are kind of living, breathing documents. These may change. So at the bottom, those are the years for these codes. So ACA was last updated in 2014. APA, Psychological Association, was 2013. Psychiatric was 2017. And the NASW was in 2017. So these could be updated. We could see these change again in the next year or two, once we get through this. So just be aware that these could be updated and these could change. But if you're looking for kind of a starting point, check out the ACAs. So our current situation is kind of giving us a great example of how ethical and legal issues may not line up right now. We all know that there could be situations that may be unethical, but they're legal, or illegal, but it's the ethical choice, right? We've all had training in this. We have to refresh this training every year. So the resolution of telemental health ethical issues follows the same process as your regular practice issues. So there's nothing unique. We still have to follow ethical practice. Be mindful of those developments in your specific field and know that it may not line up. So the example we're seeing is how they've relaxed some of the HIPAA enforcement. As soon as I read that, it set up a big ethical red flag for me, for example. Some of the issues that we've seen in telemental health before the pandemic is that providers are having to go before their boards. Complaints are being filed on different issues, and while they're investigating an issue, referring to maybe a multiple relationship or documentation issue, they're unraveling telemental health issues. So while providers may not be being reported for specific telemental health breaches, they are still coming up and they are still going on record because they've started with other issues and they're being uncovered as they go. So just be mindful of that. The most common legal violation we see in telemental health practice is crossing state lines. With the pandemic, we've seen, for example, a lot of college students got sent home very quickly if they're in another state. Now they cannot continue with their providers. If they were going, to school in South Carolina and now they're home in North Carolina, they can't continue with that provider unless that provider is licensed in both states or has received an exception. So our laws still vary state to state and even, state to country. So if you have international clients, you have to check that out. And there can be differences even by licensure. We're seeing psychology, they have something called SIPACT. And SIPACT basically means that it's a group of states that have agreed to basically issue reciprocity amongst licensed psychologists. We do not have that in counseling or social work. So if you are a counselor, you know that our letters just changed. We went from LPC and LPCAs to LCMHCs, and that is to move towards some reciprocity if we kind of get on the same page in terms of letters, but we're not there yet. But we do know these laws frequently change. We have to kind of keep up with this, and please be very, very, very careful. I have seen and gotten some questions about licensure versus certification. So I am licensed in North Carolina and Ohio because I'm originally from Ohio. I am a registered telehealth provider for the state of Florida. I am not licensed in Florida, but Florida passed a law in January that states you can register as a telehealth provider. So I can see clients who are physically in the state of Florida as long as I'm not in Florida. So this is the kind of thing we're seeing, these kind of laws kind of pop up. If you have a certificate in something such as coaching, This is not a workaround to cross state lines. I'm seeing a lot of people get coaching certifications and now working with clients in other states. Coaching is not a state-held licensure. It's kind of a gray area, but the trend that we're seeing is that these state licensure boards, if you have a certificate in coaching, for example, but you're a licensed social worker and you cross state lines, the state boards are saying, no, your social work license trumps a certification, you should know better, and they're still handing down sanctions for that. So please be very careful. It's not a backdoor, it's not a loophole. If you hold a state licensure, you are still held to those higher standards. So one of the biggest questions I get was, oh, my client is going home to Georgia for a couple weeks. Nope, they need to wait until they come back into the boundary of a state in which you are licensed, because counseling takes place at your end and the client's end. So you need to be licensed in both places. So this is the actual text from the new HIPAA enforcement discretion rules. So it's saying that covered healthcare providers, again, covered's kind of vague, may use popular applications. Now, this is not an exhaustive list. They are including Apple FaceTime, Facebook Messenger video, Google Hangouts video, Zoom, or Skype to provide telehealth without risk that the Office of Civil Rights might seek to impose a penalty for noncompliance. This is where my ethical flag went sky high, because Skype is not secure. Most of these applications are not secure or HIPAA compliant. They try, but as we've seen with, what do they call it, Zoom bombing, that they're not, that they can be hacked too, just like anything else online. So, because these are not required to be HIPAA compliant, these were not designed for healthcare. So they're saying, hey, if this is your only option, you can use it, and we're not going to penalize you just because you chose to use, Facebook Messenger, for example. But again, it goes back to that informed consent. You have to educate your clients on the risk. If this is something they're comfortable using and they're using all the time anyway, they may not think of it as a risky platform. So we have to talk to them that, hey, this could be hacked. Someone could, overhear the conversation. We may not be aware of it. So I understand this is just kind of an attempt to allow people to increase access to care. But if you can avoid using these, I would recommend it. Find something that's HIPAA compliant. And then they take it a step further to say, okay, Facebook Live, Twitch, TikTok, and similar video communications are public facing, should not be used. Twitch is very popular amongst people who do gaming. So we have the gaming gambling overlap. Twitch is something they're going to be familiar with. TikTok, I know a lot of providers have started going using Facebook Live and TikTok and similar platforms to do quick little videos, kind of one way, and that's fine. Again, it can always be hacked and reused, so I'm really hesitant with using social media, even just with the intent of getting the message out there, because once it's published, you kind of lose control over that. So just be aware, this is what the language actually says. I'm hearing a lot of, well, HIPAA's been suspended. It has not been suspended. They're just saying that if you have to use one of these other platforms, and again, not an exhaustive list, they're not going to seek you out to impose a penalty for non-compliance. This does not mean that something could go sideways and you're totally safe, right? A client could still, they could choose to engage in this. Something happens, they could still file a complaint against you, and you still have to go through the process. You may not be, found to be, guilty or liable because of the temporary emergency situation, but you still have it on your record. You still have to go through the process. So better safe than sorry is my opinion. This is the link if you want to see the full text. It's off of the hhs.gov website. So even if you don't want to write all this down, and I don't know if this is going to be made available, if you could pause this later to copy this. But if you just go to hhs.gov/HIPAA, it's going to be linked from that page. But this is the full link to get that text I just showed you.
Hey, Jessica, this is Robbie, of course. This is being recorded and will be on the UNC Behavioral Health Springboard website. So this information will be available to folks. So
Yay, thank you, because it's a long link.
no worries, no worries.
So let's make a plan. I know we have about 10 minutes left. I'm trying to get to questions, but we'll talk through how to make a plan. Conduct that needs assessment, right? Let's go back to the basics. What resources do you have? Do you have a quiet, neutral space? Do you have a blank wall somewhere? If you can get your hands on a selfie lamp, those are invaluable. My blank wall has a lot of natural light, and my lamp has different settings, so I don't look like I'm glowing all the time. I'm very pale. I constantly have to play with my lighting. But do you have resources like that? Do you have a place where there is nothing behind you? You don't want people to inadvertently get clues as to where you live, right? We still want to have privacy for us. So kind of having that blank neutral wall or a bookcase or a fireplace behind you, whatever you have. But think about, do you have a place to do it? What do you want to offer? Do you want to do phone, web, or both? And collaborate, reach out to your colleagues, see what they're doing, get some support and some ideas, get trained. You know, a lot of places are offering free or reduced trainings right now. If you have an agency, if you're not in private practice, check with your legal resources. I was talking to actually my kids' school counselors last week because they know I used to be a school counselor in an online setting. And they're like, what do we do? How do we get started? And I said, you know what? Check with the county, because I bet your legal use versus what the teachers are using. So if you are, you know, kind of under the umbrella, ask questions about technology and HIPAA compliance when looking for your vendors. And again, reaching out to other providers where you can. So this is just a couple quick resources to throw out at you that I'm personally familiar with that I can vouch for. Ready Minds has the DCC credential. They originated it. It's through CCE. So if you're an NCC or have worked with the national board, the MBCC, you're probably familiar with that. They switched in 2018 to the board certified telemental health, because it's not just counselors that are doing this. So that is their link, and they use Southside Telehealth Training Academy. So I was trained with CCE before that partnership, but I still have my credential through them. The Telebehavioral Health Institute offers certificate programs. I really love TBHI. It's run by Dr. Marlene Mayhew, and I have met with her a few times at prior ACA conferences years ago. And she really has been the trailblazer for this and really built a lot of resources. And I love their continuing ed stuff. It is really, I think, very evidence-based. She's been very careful in how it's been developed. And she's been doing it for a long time. So, and to my experience, they are the most reputable and comprehensive provider. And they do have the certificate program. You can do different levels of training with them. So thinking about the experience, we have to consider the client's perspective as well. This is one more thing that's changing for them. Again, don't assume it's for the worst. They could like this. Talk to existing clients about their options. Some might prefer to just put, support and counseling on hold. I was, mid-plan with several EAP clients that went, you know what? Life is so much better right now. I'm good. Let's touch base when this is all over. So your clients, talk to them about their options. They may not want as much support right now, or they might want more sessions. And recognizing that it might not be the best fit. And if it's your only option, having that conversation. Yeah, you know what? This may not be the best fit for you, but how can we make this work? How can we make it a little better than not seeing you at all? And going through benefits and risks, right? It's looking at accessibility, but in a different format. They may have privacy and safety issues at home. If there is any suspicion of IPV, this could be a significant risk. So you have to kind of work through that a bit. Looking at their comfort level with the technology, right? This may not be a great fit for someone who isn't into social media and doesn't have a smartphone, right? We may have to look at just doing phone-based. And that verbal versus nonverbal communication, this is a much more in-depth topic than just a bullet point. This is where getting that more specific training can really help. But learning what you gain and lose when you don't have nonverbals. And even with the video piece, some clients might be really close to their screen because they want to see you. You may not see their whole body language. They may need to be closer to their screen based on their camera and their sound technology. So there are some things to think about. How comfortable are we as providers relying just on verbal versus the nonverbals? So just some things to consider, right? And I know there's a million things to consider, but just kind of initially, if you're making the choice between web and phone, is that an issue for you to have that nonverbal? It may make a difference if they're a new client or an existing client. So if it's someone you've been seeing for weeks or months, you might be comfortable just being on the phone with them. Versus if it's a new client coming in, you might want that video chat, maybe at least that initial session to kind of get a sense of the nonverbal picture as well. So how to get started quickly, find that platform that you're comfortable with. Revising your disclosure, informed consent and intake stuff. I have seen people create completely new documents, and I've seen people just do addendums and having their clients sign the addendum. So you can do it either way. The important thing is that you've had the conversation, you've given them information to make that informed decision for themselves if they're going to continue either phone or web. If you've had to revise any policy or procedure, if you've had a change in your emergency procedures, and making sure whatever you're doing is aligning again with agency, local, state, and professional guidelines. For example, with the change with the pandemic, I have changed my scheduling, for example, because now I have a lot more availability. I'm not running my kids everywhere. So I have actually reached out to all of my, the companies I contract with and my clients saying, hey, here's my, my changed availability. I'm more available and my new patient appointments have actually gone up. So I have had to make some changes myself. Doing a trial session to get comfortable with the tech. A lot of companies offer this, but they might be a little bit backed up with the demand. So I actually have a dummy account on my portal for my husband. It's under his email address. And if I have a new feature or if I want to make sure something's going to work the right way, I actually have him just kind of sign into an empty session on another floor of the house, and he logs in and walks away and I can play with it. So if you have a second email address or a guinea pig, it's really helpful because you want to be comfortable with it. And again, consult or seek out supervision if you have questions. So speaking of, I know we only have a few minutes, but please, what questions do you have? And if we don't get to them in the next few minutes, that number is my secure office line. It's my secret cell phone. You can call, you can text me on that anytime. And my email address is there as well. And the link to my virtual office if you want to see how I have mine set up.
Yeah, thank you, Jessica. That was great information and a lot of information. And as we're waiting, perhaps I don't see any questions as of right now. I think people are probably digesting a lot of what you gave us. Oh, we've got one chat. Thank you, Jessica. Yes. I do want to say that with this new landscape that the pandemic has created, that if you run your own practice, you wear a couple of hats. One's a business hat, and I think you have to be flexible to what's happening, to things that we can't change, right? So I think this is something perhaps you might want to consider. But on the other hand, that I'm a social worker, so clinically, right? If you're running a business with a base of clients, of course you're going to want to meet them where they're at. Just because a pandemic's outside, that might even exasperate some or trigger some things with the isolation piece of of the pandemic, right? So I think this is really needed information. We do have a question here, and they ask, what percentage, Jessica, of your practice is telehealth based? I was going to ask that too. Did you say that all your clients are telehealth now?
I'm 100%. Now I've done, I've worked in a hospital setting, I've worked in community mental health agency, and we have moved a lot. So I've lived in 3 states in the last 5 years.
Right.
We're settled now. We're not going anywhere. But when we moved to North Carolina, I focused just on the tele because I found here most of my clients are not local to me. I have a lot of clients in rural areas,
Right.
clients from other states. So I found that demand really was just sticking with my telepractice. And now I am to the point, I am actually starting to shop office space to have something local, because now I'm starting to get referrals. Just my area where I live is growing. So I'm
Right.
starting to get a lot of people that want to do the face-to-face or do a hybrid approach. So I'm actually now shopping office space. And if nothing else too, frankly, to get out of my house sometimes,
Yeah.
because I was doing the work from home thing before. So
Yeah. And Jessica, you bring up a good point. North Carolina is a big state. It's got some great cities. It has some great rural areas as well, right? A lot of rural areas. So I think too, being a clinician in the great state of North Carolina, I would imagine this platform, there's somewhat of I would imagine a demand. I know with the Problem Gambling Helpline, that's why we have phone counseling that we connect to clients that aren't near Charlotte or aren't near the Raleigh-Durham area. So I think that's a great thing that I forgot to bring up, but thank you for bringing that up. And by the way, we're at the hour. Jessica, if you don't mind waiting for a couple of minutes, maybe I've got a couple of other questions. Yep. And
I can
thank you.
hang.
Okay, thank you. And thank you for everybody that joined today. Again, our next webinar is scheduled for April 16th, where Dr. Robert Cox will be speaking on trauma-informed client-based therapies with problem gambling. So thank you for being on. And if you have to leave us, have a great rest of your day. So we have a chat, and it's just a comment perhaps you would like to comment on, Jessica. It says Zoom seems to have a HIPAA compliant version that's added protection from the general Zoom platform. I know I'm on Zoom calls now almost every day. So was saying that I know with our company, we've got an alert on I think a new version that's more HIPAA compliant with what's happening with with the coronavirus situation. So
Yeah.
did you
A
know
lot
about
of,
that?
a
Yeah.
lot of, yeah, a lot of companies are, so if they were not specifically designed for telehealth, right? So like Zoom, Adobe Connect, I mean, these were not initially designed for healthcare, right?
Right.
They've had the ability to encrypt it, but it's been available at the institutional level. So when I was getting started a couple years ago and looking to do groups, I was looking at Zoom and Adobe Connect and things like that. And they offered it, but it was like thousands of dollars a year because they were
Wow.
trying to market it to healthcare large organizations. So they've had the technology. I think now with the demand, they are starting to make it available. Because I saw that, I'm like, okay, you've had that
Got it.
forever. It was just really expensive.
Right.
So now they are rolling it out. So as I said before, we're going to see a lot of changes come from this, and we're going to see a lot more availability. And I think that's one positive change we're going to see, is that people are going to up their encryption game.
Got it. Yeah. Okay. Good to know. Also, I have this question. Would you recommend a VPN for smartphone security as well as online web-based?
Yes, the smartphones, anything you can do to add to add security is a good thing. Gamban actually works via VPN, and that is how my one client accidentally defeated it. Her pushed an update that was making some other things not work, and she turned, she was going through her settings and she saw the VPN and turned it off, thinking it was the iPhone update ended up turning off her GAM ban.
Oh
So
gosh.
yeah, but she
Uh-oh.
worked with them. She's
Yeah.
like, I found it.
Holy
She
smokes.
and she always says like she's the least technologically savvy person ever. Like her kid always has to help her do stuff. So the fact that she found it and tripped on it was funny.
No.
Yeah, if you can add the VPN, it's obviously going to add another layer. But as even through my training and cause I've been doing this since 2005 before any of this was really developed. Anyone can defeat any kind of technology as long as you can demonstrate you've taken reasonable efforts to add the security. You're likely going to be fine if someone were to come down and question it.
Okay.
That's why I've got my totally stripped down smartphone. I'm showing that I'm taking reasonable steps to protect privacy.
Gotcha. This is a great question. I heard Medicare relax the don't practice across state lines rules. Do you know anything about that?
I have heard of that for physicians.
Okay.
Because they were trying to move towards that anyway. And the VA also does it for physicians. I have not heard about it for mental health. So
For
I would
mental
be
health, okay.
very, very careful. And I would get something from them. I would go to the source because I
Right.
think what's coming out, with all the Medicare changes, the fact that they're allowing counselors all of a sudden, a lot of information and misinformation is getting thrown about because it's just a lot of change very quickly. So I have only heard about it for physicians, and I don't treat that population. Obviously, being a counselor, it has not been an option for me, so I'm not as familiar with their rules. But if that is the case, I would get something documented from them directly.
Yeah, and there, you gave us some great sources, and guys, I do want to remind everybody that this will be recorded on the UNC website. So there's some great sources too. I would imagine that you could resource regarding the Medicare thing, but I hadn't heard that either. But thank you for asking on this. And then our last question is from Tristan. I'm on LCAS, LC, SWA, CSI, CPS, and CPSS. How can I get involved in help with these things during the pandemic regarding telehealth? Are there opportunities for me to use my expertise to assist folks that need help right now? If so, where? She's in Western North Carolina. So she's asking if there's, I guess, some help to provide folks through the telehealth platform to help people get through the pandemic. Does that make sense?
So if you're so I guess my question would be, what is your works? If you're talking about just volunteering, to help people, there really isn't anything specifically organized for that. It's just a matter of making, increasing access to your own clients.
Right.
The American Red Cross, I've been a telemental health, too many acronyms, a disaster mental health, DMH. I've been a disaster mental health volunteer for the American Red Cross since 2009, and we have not been activated because what we're finding is that people are able to find resources in their community, either through their primary care physician or just by going online. So, they're looking up like a DoxyMe or a VC, because a lot of these platforms kind of run like their own businesses.
Right.
So like Talkspace, for example, hey, start talking to a counselor now, click here. So nothing has been organized in terms of volunteering or just helping out pandemic, it's pandemic specific. But if you're interested in just kind of trying it out, start researching these platforms because some of them do operate with the therapist as a subcontractor.
Yeah, nice. And I think you're right. This has happened so fast, so quick that I think people are still scrambling, honestly, mentally, physically, in all ways, in reacting to this. So I think there will be some things coming our way as far as opportunities to help folks that are affected by this, either by a death or a family member that has that contracts a coronavirus or that's struggling with staying at home and the social distancing suggestions set out by the state and federal government. So I'm sure that that's to come. So I even as, a mental health clinician, I think we can all start thinking about things, how we can help. And that's a great question. And I think things we'll have some ways that we can contribute to help out.
I just thought another outlet too, another area that is really seeing an increase are EAPs.
Yes, I can speak for Morneau Chappelle here.
Right?
Yes,
So can I.
Yeah, oh yeah, that's right. You work with us. That's right. Yeah, yeah.
I worked with Morneau Chappelle separate from the gambling piece of it. I'm a general telehealth provider for their EAP. Many EAPs have offered telesupport, where they've offered phone-based counseling as part of the EAP model, because EAPs were not getting into the assessment, diagnosis, treatment plan model, right? It's brief, focused support. So a lot of EAPs have already been doing this, and I know my EAP right now is my #1 referral source, because many people are taking advantage of it because they have a set number of free sessions their employers already paid for.
Yep.
So if you're looking to kind of dip a toe in this, look at contracting, with EAP companies, because they've already been doing it, and you get kind of the short-term models. But a lot of people are reaching out just because of the pandemic to get that extra support, how to handle working from home, how to handle, juggling all the family roles. Parents that have kids, they have to be employee and teacher at the same time. So EAPs are also seeing a huge increase in this. So if you're thinking about it and want to help, but maybe don't want to go all out into a private practice type model, check out EAPs.
Yeah, great. That was a great recommendation. Okay, and then our last question. Now, remember, we have Jessica for parts 2 and 3. So, do you recommend
ideas?
do you recommend Doxy.me? Doxy.me. You had said something about that just a while ago, right?
Yeah. So, kind of as one of my rules, I do not specifically recommend particular platforms, apps, etc. or my clients, because I am not, I can't constantly keep up with changes they've made.
Understandable.
Same thing with apps. If you recommend apps to your clients, be careful, because if,
a good point,
they've had a data breach, for example, you didn't know that. Yeah. So I don't specifically recommend individual platforms, because everything is changing so quickly. I know Doxy.me, I can say, is one of the most popular ones, and they've been around for a while. So I would say do your own research, see if it meets your needs. But if you look at that hhs.gov link, the HIPAA language, it is on the list of ones that they suggest. It's, again, nothing's exhaustive. Like, they don't list We Counsel, for example, but it's been the one I've used for a few years. So there are lots of them out there, but I think Doxy.me and VC were two of the ones on the list that the HHS, has recommended. So
awesome.
There's a vague, non-committal answer.
I got you. No, thank you for your measured response. That was right on, and I figured perhaps, but thank you, and I want to thank you for staying a few minutes over to answer everyone's questions, and I want to thank you for everyone that was able to stay on with us. And I want to remind everyone, next week, April 16th, at noon, we're going to be presenting Dr. Robert Cox, talking on trauma and problem gambling. I'll be sending out another email to the network providers with the North Carolina Problem Gambling Helpline. If you're not part of that network, that you should have received an email, and it gives you directions on how to register. So it'll be another Zoom call. So Jessica, we look forward for our next date on April 23rd. I'll of course be in contact with you, and thank you for running over a few minutes and answering all the questions. I knew this would be a popular subject and will be in the days and months to come. So thank you to everybody, and thank you, Jessica.
My pleasure. Thank you, everyone.
All right, everybody have a great day.